Of course.
It's gonna be my.
That was my joke today.
Is there a copy of the minutes? So we.
Don't push them in a certain succession. Just 10 o'clock from this.
Do you have any hard copies of the agenda? Okay, I will.
Unless it changed.
That's always a possibility. I've got a digital copy here. Just-
Nah, nothing's changed. Would you like one?
He's got one.
Okay. Sit here for an hour. Shit.
Yeah, come on up. Fill it in.
Wow. Would that be
Just special. Come on, buddy. So it didn't make a minute.
Is this a field promotion?
Yeah. Bypass me.
For the ants. No melody to it.
The City Guest Network, no internet?
I'm on City Guest, it's working.
So I haven't got enough signal here to tether on my phone. City Guest is working?
Mm-hmm.
It was poking.
Yeah, my wife and I don't get our usual Saturday outing now that I don't have to deliver 2 packages.
What are we waiting for?
Wait for Tim. He's the maestro.
I mean, I'm sure everyone could remedy that for you.
I thought we were waiting for something specifically.
Have we got a quorum here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's down to,
Hmm?
I think there's down to. Really?
All right. What's that?
Have a gal.
All right. I'll use it. Okay. Welcome to the meeting, everybody. So just to do a quick recap, welcome to this regular monthly meeting of the Charlottesville BAR. After presentations by staff and the applicant and members of the public, will be allowed 2 opportunities to speak. Speakers shall identify themselves and give their current address. The chair will first ask for questions from the public, then from the BAR. After questions are closed, the chair will ask for comments from the public. Members of the public will have, for each case, up to 3 minutes to ask questions and up to 3 minutes to comment. Comments should be limited to the BAR's jurisdiction, that is, regarding the exterior design of the building and site. Following the BAR's discussions, and before the vote, the applicant shall be allowed up to 3 minutes to respond for the purpose of clarification. Thank you all for participating. This huge crowd here. Okay, so matters for the public not on the public agenda. Anybody have anything to introduce? No. Okay. Consent agenda. Minutes from March 13th, the February makeup meeting, and minutes from March 19th, the regular meeting. Anybody in the BR have any comments about either meeting? A motion to approve the
Yes.
February makeup meeting?
Do you have 2 COAs attached to that?
As always, part of those minutes, yes, I guess you're right, part of the consent agenda, right. So we have a certificate of appropriateness for the 1102 Carlton Avenue, the solar panel additions. Any comments about that? All right, and then a certificate of appropriateness on the consent agenda for the replacement of the loading dock door at 134 10th Street Northwest. Comments? Okay, so anybody make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
And I will recuse myself from the minutes of March 13th, but otherwise, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None. The ayes have it. Okay, so now we're to deferred items. I know that's very dramatic, I'm sorry.
So I'm done?
You're done. That was well worth it, wasn't it? We could move your consent agenda to the end of the meeting if you prefer.
Enjoy dinner.
So, 608 Preston Place, side chapter of Sigma Chi Fraternity House Corporation, John Matthews applicant.
Okay, good evening. This is for the Sigma Chi renovations and addition. A little bit of background. This was a building constructed in 1929. It is a contributing structure within the Rugby Road University Circle Venable Neighborhood ADC District. Last month, you all reviewed, or you all approved some modifications to the planned building renovations and some site and landscaping features, including some fencing. You requested additional information on the proposed exterior lighting, and that is what's being presented this evening. Staff recommends approval. Also suggests 2 conditions. One, that all exterior lighting, including LED lighting, should have warm color temperature less than 3000 K, and any exterior lamping that emits 3000 or more lumens should be full cutoff. The applicant is here. Do you have any questions?
Okay, so any questions from the public? Or do you want to make a presentation, Mary?
I don't need to present, but if
Okay.
you have questions, I can.
All right. Any questions from the BAR? I do have 2 questions. I was wondering about the wall packs. I see they have controls like a motion detector and light, basically checking to see whether it's dark out or not. But do they have any sort of a timer on them or anything like that, the wall packs?
Meaning the sconce?
Yeah,
The
yep.
WST
Yep.
sconce?
Yep.
It has a, so yes, it is listed as.
It's got a motion detector and a light sensor on it, but does that mean it's on all night?
No, that means it detects the motion, it takes 3 seconds to warm up, it'll be on for 5 minutes, and then it ramps down in 5 minutes.
Okay, great. Right. So it's purely for security
Yeah.
in that case. Okay. And then my other question had to do with the specified compact fluorescent in the hanging lamp in the front entrance there. That's a, I don't think the color temperature, that was just a compact fluorescent, but it didn't specify color temperature that I noticed. And I also wondered if it was dimmable.
It's an A
Is it?
LED lamp.
Oh, okay, because
the
it was
type?
circled, for some reason, somebody had the the 242 TRT circled. Because if it was an A lamp, then that kind of gets you right there anyway, LED.
Well, I guess I have conflicting information from our engineer, but
Okay.
my most recent email says A lamp, so I'll go with that.
Okay,
And
I'm fine.
change it to that if you're
That's
good with that.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay.
Those are my only two questions. Anybody else have a question?
Could you put that in layman's terms so I can?
So they're putting an A lamp, LED A lamp, I believe there are two bulbs in that fixture. And I was just questioning the use of compact fluorescents because of the light quality. And often they aren't dimmable for that matter.
Like A lamp, not a lamp.
A lamp. A lamp is an imitation of an Edison bulb.
Okay, gotcha.
I don't see any Edison bulbs here, but they used to be all ubiquitous, you know, the round bulb with the tungsten filament in it. AKA a light bulb.
You're gonna know so much about lighting, Jeff, when this is done.
I'm sure that I don't later look a few minutes ago, what?
What the hell's an A bulb?
I put A light bulb.
Yeah. A light bulb in the whole building, yeah, that works. No comments, comments from the public? Comments from the board?
Vastly improved.
Okay, so, and do you have any final statement you'd like to make?
I'm
You're done? You're cooked? Okay. All righty.
She'll be back later.
She'll be back.
Yes, I'll be at the end of the agenda.
Okay, so, in that case, anybody make a motion?
What don't you do and put your lamping in there?
Well, she actually addressed it, so,
We should probably have it in the motion, though, that it's as said during the
as
meeting.
specified, yeah, that's true. So, who wants to make a motion? You don't have to do it, Carl. I could, as chair, I could actually force somebody else to do it.
All right, I'll do it. Fine. Having considered the standards set forth in the city code, including city design guidelines for site design elements, I move to find the proposed lighting plan satisfies the BAR's criteria and is compatible with this property and other properties in the Rugby Road University Circle Venable Neighborhood ADC District. The BAR approves the application as submitted with the specifications for the hanging pendant to be as described during the meeting, which is a type A bulb LED.
That's good enough.
Okay.
Yep, that works.
I second.
Thanks, Aaron. Okay, so next on the docket.
We should
We got a vote.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sorry, I'm sorry. Procedure is not my strong point. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
No, Joe, or
Came from
Somebody
Mr.
over there did.
Stephen did.
Yeah.
All right. Come on. Move on. All right, so now we have a certificate of,
Forward, okay. He's still in here? Yes, he is. All right.
no, okay. Under new items, certificate of appropriateness for 713 Park Street.
Correct, and this, so we're clear, this is both the demolition of an existing garage and the proposed construction of a new garage and accessory apartment building or unit. So, bit of background, the main house of 713 Park Street was constructed around 1861. It is among the city's oldest remaining buildings. The brick garage behind the house is not original to the house. The concrete foundation, brickwork, and extant window molding suggested dates to the early 20th century. The garage is shown on the 1929 Sanborn maps. However, maps prior to 1929 did not include this area. The garage is not mentioned in city surveys that were completed in the 1970s and 80s. nor is it mentioned in the 1980 National Register of Historic Places Historic District nomination of this area. However, when the city adopted the North Downtown ADC District, the garage was included as a contributing structure. Again, this is a request to demolish the existing 18-foot by 18-foot single-story brick, single-car garage, and to construct in the same location a new two-story, 24-foot by 30-foot garage with a loft space above and with a 10-foot by 10-foot storage space at the rear for lawn and garden equipment. Now, just so hopefully you all saw the email I sent out, but Doug sent me something last week. The design's been revised somewhat since you all looked at it in the initial discussion and from the initial submittal. And the garage has been shifted slightly uphill towards Park Street, and the footprint has been reduced. They've eliminated that 10-foot by 26-foot segment that was designated for storage, and so they've pulled the 10 by 10 outdoor equipment shed up tight with the garage. So first, on the proposed demolition of the existing garage, while locally designated as contributing structure, the garage is not original to the main house, and it was likely built 50 to 60 years later. The design materials are utilitarian and not unique. There's nothing noteworthy in its design or its features. The demolition of the garage, in staff's opinion, is compatible with the BAR guidelines for demolition, and in the staff report, Cami did a really good job of addressing each of those questions in the demolition guidelines, and we can review those if you want. Staff also recommends a condition of approval that prior to demolition, the applicant will provide staff with a sketch plan and photographs of the existing garage. So it may not be tremendous architectural merit, but it's still something we would like to record its existence. Relative to the proposed new garage, you all reviewed this last month in a preliminary discussion. You indicated support for the design of the new garage, but expressed concern about its width, bless you, its width and orientation. You suggested that it not compete with the main house from the front or from the rear in location, scale, or design. I attached to the staff reports excerpts from the minutes that sort of laid out some of the questions you all had asked. Staff's opinion, BAR should discuss if the proposed design addresses the question and comments that you all raised. You all can request additional details and information. For example, if you want to see renderings or photo simulations, that's within your purview to request if you think it's necessary. That said, staff also recommends that you address this in two motions. One, to approve the demolition of the garage, if you do, and second, to, approve or deny the proposed new building. So, little complicated in, like I said, in the staff report and how we addressed each item, but if you have questions, we can talk about it, but I won't get into that, into the staff report further, unless you want me to. And just to be clear, did you all have, it's a drawing that you'll make sure you're all looking at the right drawing. It has on the front on the plan, you can see where they've shifted the footprint slightly and reduced the footprint of the building. So,
Right.
and any questions? Otherwise, the applicant's here.
Okay.
Members of the board, good evening. I'm Doug Gilpin, and I am representing James and Cordelia Gelly, who are in the audience, the new owners of 713 Park Street. It's good to have them here with us. Jeff, you did a great job. I mean, I should sit down and let you do the entire presentation. This was, I took a lot of your comments, especially Tim's and Mike's and your chairperson's comments to heart from the standpoint of the general massing, the footprint of the building that we discussed last time. And we, first of all, made it smaller, which was the plan that was originally shown in the submittal. And then a week ago Thursday, we were out on the site and we were looking at some of the trees and the landscaping and some of the other areas, and also thinking forward about the addition that is going to be planned for the house in the next upcoming BAR meeting. And we said, why don't we move that 26 by 10 foot conditioned area, which I think was also one of your suggestions, to the present house. So we did that, and we reduced the footprint significantly. We also were able to place the garage, the front right corner of the proposed garage, in the exact location of the present right front corner of the garage, the way it stands, which allows us plenty of clearance to a significant hackberry tree right on the property line, i.e. we will not be cutting into the roots at all of the tree. It also allows us to nestle it into the little notch area in the back where there is a sewer easement across the property. So the footprint of the building is now 30 feet by 24 feet deep with that 10 foot by 10 foot appendage for the garden storage in the back. Jeff, I have put together the complete package for all of the board members, and also have large-scale drawings of the same drawing plan submittals here. Everything that's in the big roll of drawings is within the booklet themselves.
And so we're clear also, the image that's on the screen still has that storage space, so this is,
Yeah, disregard the center section of the image above you that you see in the second and third elevations. So it would just be the building itself that is gone. It's been coupled together. So I say 30 foot by 24 foot with a 10 foot by 10 foot appendage on it. It fits beautifully on the site. I think the key thing that we all discussed last time, let's talk about the demolition. It's probably an early to mid to maybe even late 1920s garage. If you've been to the site, you've noticed the cracks in the foundation. There are cracks in the brick itself, 2 bricks thick. The roof structure is sagging. The door is, the sliding door is, I think hasn't moved in some years. And there's a window and a door, access door on the north side. That particular person door is also inactive. So we are requesting demolition, or I call it removal, of that particular building and replacement with the new structure. As noted before, when I was here last month, the new structure, we're looking from the standpoint of materials of using board and batten siding on the exterior of the 1.5-story section. Materials for the trim work would be a composite material, all would be painted. The roofing material, we have reviewed a material that is actually, that Mike's probably familiar with out at Bundoran Farm. It's called EnviroShake. Now, I use the term, I say EnviroShake is the name of the company, but they have a composite shingle which replicates the character of a wood shingle roof. Ideally, I'd love to put a wood shingle roof on this building. However, we would also be replacing it in about 15 years. So, and of course, I don't want to put a wood shake roof on it. So the other alternatives would be, if not the EnviroShake, we would look for other composites, which, again, I have not seen the character that I like of the EnviroShake's shingle roof. We'd be looking at an fiberglass asphalt shingle roof or a pre-finished metal roof. The concern I have with a pre-finished metal roof is that it just does not weather or have the patina of, say, a copper roof, or a roof that we're considering for the main house, a Freedom Gray, which is a zinc tin coated roof, which will definitely have a nice patina after many years. So I felt from the standpoint of brightness and looking down the alleyway is probably just to keep it as low key as possible using this this EnviroShake shingle material, which after several years will impart the appearance of an aged cedar shingle roof. Colors, we are discussing colors at this time. First of all, we'd like to be doing a paint analysis of the main building to see if the white color of the original house is originally white. My gut feeling is it could have been more of a creamy color, and may use that cream in the addition or in this outbuilding. But globally, we're looking at possibly a warm gray in that range for the garage outbuilding, with maybe a creamier trim and maybe a dark green for the doors. Again, at Bundoran Farm, there was a house recently repainted, Lower Bundoran House, using Stonington gray, Benjamin Moore color with white dove. It's a remarkable, beautiful late 1800s paint combination, and fits beautifully in a wooded area, just very much like 713 Park Street. Are there any questions that members of the board have of me or of James and Cordelia?
First of all, I like it. I think it's a remarkable difference, and I really like how it fits there. And I am glad that you moved the footprint back to where the old one was, to the front, because I feel like that drop does help. Do you have an idea of what the elevation change is going to be?
From the standpoint of the height of the ridge, I would estimate that the present building is probably about 16, 17 feet in height. This building is going to be about 23 feet in height. We're under the 25-foot maximum.
Yeah, okay.
So before the bar goes too much farther, anybody from the public have any questions for Doug? Yes.
Will I be actually able to?
Yes, you'd be actually be able to come up and talk. So do you want to comment, or do you want to have a question?
Well, I have several comments.
Okay, comments are fine. I'll go back to the questions from the bar. Just wanted to make sure the public got addressed. So anybody have any questions?
So speaking of colors and finishes, just so I'm clear, it says semi-solid stain finish, so you're going to see the wood grain coming through. Is that the intention?
Possibly. We're looking at all the avenues of that. My personal feeling with regards to, I've been on several other architectural review boards, my feeling is, as it's going up, we'd like to do a sample panel on the site, maybe two-sided, so you see it in the sun and the shade at the same time. We might stand back and we might say the colors we've selected are not right, and we may need to tinker it. So we would certainly want to have the BAR review the colors on an appropriate on-site location, well before we start painting.
Have you narrowed down what the garage door material is going to be?
I have not narrowed down a manufacturer. I think it may be Overhead Door Company, but it's one of their standard ones that would have that particular appearance that we're looking at. But again, it's going to be a painted finish on it.
Okay.
It would not. I do not want to do a wood door, just because, again, I don't think that a wood door is going to last with longevity. But it will be a paint finish.
And the general appearance would be what's drawn?
Exactly. In the supplementary information that I submitted, I had one of the great things about the Overhead Door Company is you can do a sort of a visualizer, and that came directly from their website. Again, with the windows above and a crossbuck treatment.
And then the shed doors, do you know what those are going to be yet?
They're going to be, the two doors going into the garden shed are fiberglass. They're made by Pella, and they would be painted.
Okay.
Any other questions from the VAR? Also, anybody have any questions regarding demolition?
So, and did you say the window material?
The windows will be Pella Architect Reserve clad units, and they will be their standard, their paint finish, but again, depending upon which colors we select.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Comments from the public?
And by the way, I'd also, before you finish, I also would have one more little handout after.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thanks, Doug.
My name is Colette Hall. I live at 101 Robertson Lane. My land is contiguous with the property we're talking about. In other words, my backyard abuts with their backyard. So I can look from my backyard and see the present garage. So the house, it's called the Judge Watson House, built in 1840, is a magnificent, beautiful structure. I have no feelings about the garage. It's old, and as the gentleman said, it was probably built around 1920. I don't know when it was built, but I don't have any feelings about you shouldn't remove it. I don't care about that. What I care about is what they're going to replace it with. So I understand there was a meeting about this property in March. I didn't get any notification of that, and I would have loved to have got notification of that so I could have come in more on the ground up to speak about this. It almost feels more like a fait accompli, but it's not totally because you're still asking a few questions. I'm glad they're not going to take down the hackberry, but they are going to take down, I believe, and I'm asking this question, other trees. And when they take, one might be a walnut, but I have not actually verified what the trees are. That means I will see that garage more clearly than I see it now. There are multiple trees in that backyard. There used to actually be about 50. And the past owner, whom they bought the property from, took a plow or whatever you call it.
Bulldozer.
A bulldozer, thank you, and bulldozed down 50 trees. But anyway, it's his property. But it's still, there's some big trees there, and so I wonder, number one, are they taking down any trees, although they're going to save the hackberry? Number two, I'm glad to see they're making it smaller, because my bedroom windows and my main eating area, kitchen area, are as what looks onto my backyard, which sees their garage. So anything that's going to impact, so it's going to impact just my visual side of it. So I'm glad they're going to be very careful about colors and shapes and stuff. And I'm very glad they're going to make it smaller. One of my questions is, and I can see it at least on this sketch, there is going to be, going to the second floor, a walkway, a stairway. And I believe when I read the schematics about it on the BAR website, I think they said it was going to be metal. Now, that dovetails into my second question, which I'll get to. Metal is loud. And I don't care how carefully somebody walks up a metal walkway, stairway, it reverberates. I hope I don't have to stop, because I have a lot more questions. And I don't think there's a lot of people that want to talk about this. And it reverberates. I would love, instead of metal, if they could make it a wooden staircase. And that goes into my second question, which is, what are they going to use the second floor for? It says on your website it's going to be an apartment, but then one of my neighbors noted she didn't see any plumbing that was noted, and if it's going to be an apartment, you obviously have to have a water source. So is it going to be like an office, a home office? Is it going to be like their art studio? Yeah, I'm just throwing these out. And what are they going to use that for? Because if it's going to be an entirely different people than the people who live in the main house, then we're going to have more traffic, more noise, more light coming through the windows, more everything, and it
So
involves
that-
rental property.
So that part actually isn't part of the BAR's purview. Use is not our,
Even though it's R1 zone, you don't deal with that
that is not our call. And R1 zoning allows for
for rental.
accessory
Yeah,
dwelling units.
accessory,
So, I
yeah.
mean, they're by right,
Yeah,
I would argue they're fine, and they have a large lot.
I do know that. I do know that. I just wondered if
the-
you knew what it was going to be used for.
The question about the tree, maybe Doug, do you have some idea about the landscape side of this? I mean, I believe they'll be coming back to us at some point to address that, but,
Okay, this will be a tree on the south side and a tree on the west side.
right. So that would be more something that'd be addressed at a landscape plan level, but that's,
That
we would
comes to
duly
you.
note that, and that's something to ask the applicant about.
Stair.
And the stair,
And the
and
stairs.
the stair.
Address the stair
And-
Yes.
material.
Yeah.
So, to ask
So-
what this is going to be used for, I should go to the homeowners.
What's,
Is that the best?
That's a administrative review, accessory dwelling is allowed. There's no,
So they don't have to say what it's going to be used for?
Well, the second floor plan in our packet that is public material shows a bedroom and a kitchenette and a toilet.
So you would need plumbing.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
there's plumbing involved, because
Yeah.
that's the proposal.
Well, I guess it wasn't on the schematic at the BAR website.
It's not necessary for our view, and the use of that, it could be one of the big indoor.
The building could be poured out of solid concrete and then sided in, appropriate materials, and that would be the end of it. We have no bearing, we have
For
no
your jurisdiction.
determination.
Right.
Our
I get it.
jurisdiction is strictly the exterior, the massing of the building, the detailing, materials choices, that sort of thing. We have no say as far as use is concerned.
All right.
And the proposed use is a matter of, it's administrative use, there's not if they meet the criteria.
Right, it's just-
use, That's been
yeah.
reviewed, so that use as an accessory apartment or a guest apartment
Yeah.
is.
There's no,
Okay. No, I understand what you're saying, but I didn't know the appropriate
but I mean,
personnel.
they're your neighbors, so I encourage you to meet them and ask them.
Yeah, that's what I said, it would be, but I didn't even know if they had moved in. My
They
second,
have moved in. So I hear
my
you.
second and very last question was, I thought I just heard the contractor say, or maybe it's the architect, so, excuse me, something about an addition to the main house. And I would hate to see that because it's an historic property and you definitely have a purview over that.
Yes.
That is planned, and that will be addressed in a separate review. There's, I understand there's extensive restoration of the house planned with some modifications possibly on the rear, but that will all come back as a separate.
Yeah, that's
and so when something comes in as an action item for the BAR, that's when we send out the.
So will you send me another letter when that?
And, well, it's.
So you will get another letter within the next month. The reason you didn't get it for last month was because it was a preliminary discussion. So we don't send out notices because there's no action taken on it.
But I'll get another letter
So
for
you'll
the.
get another
Okay.
letter for what other subsequent applications
Okay.
come in with this property, whether it be a landscaping plan, in addition to the back of a house. If they decide they want to completely demolish what they're building and change this, that'll come from the BAR.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for all of your time.
Sure thing. Doug, would you like to just address the site plan question? Mark, I'll let you up in a second.
James is going to answer the tree question.
Okay.
From the standpoint of the stairs, it is a metal stair. We looked at maintenance from the standpoint. We also want to try to keep it as light as possible visually. There's another important factor, and that is just the safety of going up. So it was an open, gridded tread system, open risers, just to allow rain, snow, ice not to be able to accumulate on it. I didn't want to do a historically appropriate styled Italianate stairs, set of stairs going on, so I wanted to do something a little more on the contemporary side. James can certainly address the tree.
Doug, can you say something about what you think about the sound coming from the stair, and if that's a real issue?
I don't think it is an issue. And as a matter of fact, it's not an apartment house where you'd be having people going up and down the stairs. It would be very infrequent from the standpoint of people going up.
Thank you.
James?
Hi. Nice to
Can
meet
you
guys.
state your name for the
Yes.
record?
It's James Gelly, Gelly. My wife Cordelia, almost in the back row there. The question asked about a tree, there is a smaller, younger hackberry tree that would, as I can lay out the size of the new garage, I don't think we'll be able to save it. There's as many as 3 smaller volunteer trees. But the objective is to save as many trees. We had an arborist out today, and basically our concern, I think, is the same as my neighbors, which is to conserve as much of what we've inherited in terms of a landscape, and that especially includes the trees. But I think there's one smaller, diameter hackberry that just is in the footprint of the proposed garage. Hope that answers that question.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So, any comments from the public? Oh, yes, one more. Go ahead.
Mark Cabot. First, just like to ask you all, please pull your microphones to you, because I know there's some people watching at home and they can't hear you if you don't have your microphones to you. I hope that everybody received the email that I sent out a few days ago. Just want to recap a few things that I put in that. The comments that I've heard from some people were concerned about the size of the dwelling that's planned to be put there, but it sounds like that they reduced the size of that, so that's good. Hopefully it's reduced sufficiently enough. I do remember being over at Colette's house in the past years, and that you could be there and not even see that house because there were a lot of trees and shrubberies and so on there, and that's been removed. I hope that the house that's being proposed, or the dwelling that's being proposed, will architecturally fit into the style for that area. And I'll count on you all to basically make sure that that is correct. Hope that some screening will be done in the way of trees, bushes, and so on the property. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Comments from the board? Okay, so shall we go into the, get a motion for the demolition? Any discussion about demolition?
If I could offer a comment, I would just, that on the site plan that Doug's provided, I see a maple, mulberry, this is to the, I guess, to the rear of the property. I don't see any other vegetation or trees noted, but certainly there's none, I guess, other than what's at the garage noted for removal. So I guess possibly could request some, or make a statement of clarification if no other trees are being removed, and maybe submittal for the record of a more detailed site plan showing where the vegetation is, if that's a concern. That that's one way to address it, but I don't see a whole lot of trees in that backyard right now. And I'm sorry, my mic doesn't work. I have to use my coach's voice a little louder. So that would be my only suggestion, is if you have some questions about what's being removed or left, you can request that that be noted for the record or included in your motion.
Okay. So does anybody want to make a motion with regards to the demolition?
Mr. Chair, I move that having considered the standards set forth within the city code, including the ADC guidelines for demolition, I move to find that the proposed garage demolition satisfies the BAR's criteria and is compatible with this property and other properties in the North Downtown ADC district, and that the BAR approves the application as submitted.
A second.
Actually, some discussion. Staff had requested that they, that we add that,
Oh, the
they do the-
documentation?
yeah, photos and a plan, I believe, sketch plan and photographs.
I would like to amend my motion to add that the applicant provide a sketch plan and photo documentation of the existing garage. Is that okay with the second?
I re-second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, now we are on to the COA, request for a COA for the garage itself. Anybody,
Did you have another, didn't you want to give, you had another?
did you have something you wanted to give us before we did that?
And you finish what you're doing, and I just
Okay.
give a little teaser for the
Okay.
Go right ahead.
You sure we shouldn't see that first?
No, we might rescind that demolition.
I'd just say that I find that the changes have been very positive. I think it makes the building holds together better. It's more appropriate to the site. It's in keeping with the neighborhood and with the style of the house. The only element that really sticks out to me for some discussion perhaps is the scale of the window in the dormer facing the street. I gather that it's probably picking up on some of the proportions of the larger window above the main house, which is almost the scale of an entire door But to my eye, at least on this garage structure, it seems out of scale with the scale of the garage doors and with the other fenestration on the building. And so that might be one recommendation I might make, is to reduce the scale of that window somewhat.
I didn't really notice that, but now that you're pointing it out, I agree. It does feel big.
Yeah, compare it to the garage door.
It's about 1.25.
Yeah.
It's big.
The metal.
75% would do it.
Yeah. On the metal stairs, noise tends to be a factor of gauge and support. One thing that I notice about these stairs that I would think about is that metal stairs in a straight run of this length tend to bounce a lot, and that can be really annoying. So I'd consider that, or maybe figure out how it's going to be supported. But with more support, and the right gauge, I don't think you're going to have a noise issue.
The size of the unit upstairs too is such that it seems like a mother-in-law type apartment. I don't think it's going to have the kind of use that it might be feared by others.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments? Anybody care to make a motion?
Could we hear the architect's response to the comment about the large window, or the scale of the window on the front elevation? And
It's up to the architect. Sure.
Here's the simple answer. The Pella software does not have an archtop window that I liked, and I put it in there, but if you look at the construction drawings, it has an archtop window. And if you go back to some of the original sketches, I had a nice archtop window which mimicked the character, so it was much softer. If you look back in some of the preliminary ones, that's what's going to be utilized on that. It just happened to be. Yes, there you go. Justin's got the sketch. That's what it's going to be looking like. Does that answer?
yeah. So you submitted a lie.
Blame it on Pella. Any other questions?
So it's on the large drawings?
It actually is in the construction drawing package. Certainly, I'd be happy to submit the final cut sheets from the shop drawings for the board's review, but it is intended to have a segmental arch on the top to have the character of some of the windows in the house.
And it'll still go down to about a foot above the floor
It may
level?
be even a little smaller, because at one time we were looking at that as being a bedroom, and now the bedroom is going to be on the north side of the house, so we may make it slightly smaller so it does not have to be egress compliant.
Ah, good. Thank you, Doug.
For official purposes, so we're referring to Doug's drawings dated 4/12/2019, sheet BAR2, and it's elevation 1.
What's that project on West Bay that gave us the 6 foot by 4 foot block?
Well, no, because this doesn't have the arch
Right.
top.
And so that's where, so that we get all of our terminology correct, there is a sketch.
4/9/19.
Right, and this is what I put together, just to contrast and compare. So this was from the preliminary design discussions last, when was that?
This is dated the 19th.
Now, there was something even before that. Did I not put a date on there? When did you first come, Doug, and had sort of the preliminary discussion?
Well, 4/9/19 is when the sketch You have
That's
that.
it, that's it. So,
Right.
Yeah, that's much better.
That's what it's going to be, folks.
Okay.
so it's so the drawing that I referred to, that elevation, the window in that elevation will comply with the sketch that was presented in the preliminary discussion
Yes.
last year, so, or earlier. I don't remember the date.
So how can we refer to that in a motion?
It's in this staff report.
This is, in the staff report, and it's an attachment.
Page 15 of the staff report.
It would be better to refer to, it's what was presented, I just can't remember the date, that's why, when we had the preliminary discussion.
Okay, cool.
It's the last BAR meeting. So March.
Yes. We've gone through here, everything together.
March 19th?
That's correct, yeah, I'm sorry. It's this third iteration now that's got, so yes, March 19th, there was the sketch presentation.
Preliminary design, east elevation, March 19th.
Correct. Yeah, and that will, and then more specifically, we're referring to the window, as presented in the drawings dated 4/12/2019, that window on elevation 1 will match what was presented in the preliminary drawings on March 19th.
Okay.
And I would say that the minutes would probably capture that, so,
Thank you for who's Gary Butcher.
is Carrie getting all my words?
We'll see.
Got lots of words.
I got it.
Okay, so anybody care to make a motion?
And I'm sorry, if you would also clarify that this is, again, this is the amended design. The staff report was written with
For,
those, what was submitted, which was not the preliminary design. So the staff report submittal, last week we received drawings dated April 12th.
right?
That eliminated that 10 by 26 space, shifted it. And
Here, just use this.
yeah, and so,
The amended final review as submitted.
Dated 12 April.
Yeah, April 12 as handed to the board.
so there's, right, the revised book, and then there's the 3 sets of 3 pages of drawings, which were the BAR 1, BAR 2, and BAR 3, dated 4/12/2019, and the amended bound version and specifications dated 4/12/2019. So those are the 2 changes.
I was just saying the materials submitted on 4/12, since they're both.
Works for me.
Leave it to the engineer to simplify things.
So, are we all square on that? Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll go for it.
Okay,
All right, having considered the standards set forth in the city code, including ADC guidelines for new construction additions, I move to find the proposed new garage satisfies the BRS criteria, is compatible with this property and other properties in the North Downtown ADC district, and that the BAR approves the application as submitted per the submittal received on April 12th, 2019, with the window over the garage doors to more closely match the window from the pre-application, preliminary discussion materials with the arch top, with a recommendation for a heavier gauge metal and some extra supports on the stairs. And anything else?
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
If you all would do me a favor and yank the sign off we've been forgetting that. And welcome to the neighborhood. You have a lot of neighbors up here and me, so we're
Let's
excited
see-
about what you're going to do there.
Let's see what else does.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only other thing is that this is, we'll be presenting next month, submitting next month, the addition on the back of the building, and I wanted to at least do this as, I don't call it a teaser or what have you, but at least to familiarize yourself with the basic project in a schematic layout, so have you take a look at it, just give you more time to review it.
Thank you.
Do you want any of these packets back?
Pardon me?
Do you want any of these packets back? Okay.
All yours.
Okay.
Recycle.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
And can this, Jeff, be shared with the public, what has been just given to us?
Mr. Gilpin, can I just also ask, the PDFs that we received, they were not always legible, some of the smaller text. So for the subsequent applications, just double check that before we do that. Thanks. Okay.
Now, we're looking at a certificate of appropriateness for 600 West Main Street.
Hey, how you been?
We'll talk.
Sorry, Alan, I mixed you up in my, there it is. There it is. All right. This is a COA request for a mural to be painted on the west side of 600 West Main. This is the same, one of the buildings we've been discussing with the 600 West Main project, and you all know the history of it and what's been going on there, but this is would be the James Hawkins house, which was built in 1873, and later became, with an addition, became the Midway Market. The application is by the Bridge Project of Charlottesville, and the proposed mural will be, is proposed by a South African artist, Faith 47, and in her words, she describes this piece as a conceptualized design that accentuates the architecture of the building and contributes a subtle sense of magic and majesty to the West Main Street corridor. This is the second mural we've discussed in the last
overlays color and design elements and lines over the approved wall color, and leaves plenty of negative space in order to account for the maintaining of the architectural elements of the building. Care was taken to design a mural that would look appropriate alongside the existing foliage on West Main Street, but we're also, we know that the trees may or may not stay in the long run, and we wanted to make sure that the mural would stand alone strongly either way, whether or not the foliage was to remain or was to be removed at some future date. Additionally, we believe that the mural is congruent with the cropping and the appropriate considerations made for past murals to allow for the shape of the building to stand alone by itself and not be obfuscated by harsh lines or drastic design elements. We really believe that this mural will be a beloved fixture along West Main Street. We believe that it'll be a bright addition to the corridor, and we believe that it has a really nice historical relevance to the area, and just overall will be a nice addition.
Questions from the public? Questions from the board?
Yeah, what is the expected life of the mural?
Well, we use paint typically that has a 30-year color lock technology to it. That's typically that's the level of paint we use. We put a mural up to stay, but we also acknowledge that murals are just part of the landscape, and they have to come down. They have to change over time. They have to get removed. They have to. So while we're putting a mural up to last forever, we ultimately leave that mural in the hands of the building owner to own.
Thanks.
Is there specific prep that you're doing to the existing paint to make sure your mural doesn't just flake off with old paint?
There's no prep that we're doing. However, the building has already been slated to be repainted. It's already been approved. Y'all, I believe, have approved the color design. There is a color sample that I included on the PDF, that forest wood color, that is going to be used to give the whole building a fresh coat of paint, and that will be the base coat, the fresh base coat that this design will be sort of overlaid. Our artist, her process involves almost like a transparency effect. So it's not a hard, stark image. It's not quite as graphic as this rendering might imply. Is why I included some work samples of her previous work as well, to sort of show that she sort of works in those layers like that, to give you a clearer idea of that.
Good. So basically, she's getting a primed, ready.
It's going to be primed and ready for her to go as soon as she arrives on site.
So it's.
I still don't know what wall we're painting.
So it's.
It seems like you guys are putting, it's an awful lot of work, and it really looks like a beautiful mural that is going on a wall that may not be visible for a long time. Is there, what made you choose this site over?
We were contacted by the building owners, and we know that there are risks in that regard, and it's similar to the chief mural across the street on that
which is
building.
really kind of heartbreaking that it was, it's covered in stucco and.
Right, but it's also kind of magical back there, right? You can still see that old mural back there, and even though it's kind of obfuscated, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, we know that there are risks to that. There's always that risk when you put up a mural, and we'll enjoy it while it lasts, and we'll remember it when it's gone.
So as Brian Haas would say, it's ephemeral.
Well, I guess so.
So, comments from the public? You're going to be the public today?
He's gonna answer my question.
To speak, but
Oh,
to Carl's point, I'm Jeff Dreyfus, Bushman Dreyfus Architects. To your point, Carl, we'll be talking in just a few minutes about the property directly adjacent. And if we can, the owners would like to determine a way that that mural may actually be a part of the next project. There's no guarantee in that regard, but we all see it as something that could be a real public amenity. And our hope is that we can design with that as part of the next project.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks. That wasn't my news to share, so.
Our agenda beat you to it.
All right.
Yes.
So, I guess, are we still in question mode? Anybody else have any questions? Okay, comments from the public, other than Jeff's answering Carl's question? Okay, comments from the board?
I like the location. I think it's nice, whether it gets obscured or not. Like you said, with the chief, it's back there, and I walked by it the other night, and it's fun to see back there. It's better than just a plain old painted crummy wall. So it's kind of one of those little treats of Charlottesville.
And that wasn't meant to be a leading question. I think this is perfectly appropriate. I think it's beautiful. I mean, yeah, I can't wait to see it. I hope we get to see it for a while. So yeah, I guess I will leave that up to what happens to 612 West Main.
Very cool.
I mean, I feel like it's upped the game also in terms of the sophistication that we've seen murals thus far. I think it's very intriguing, and I think it'll be great.
Yeah, I guess we're not really judging art, but
No,
our
but
work is really cool.
Yeah, how does that work? Just out of curiosity, because I know in the past we've reviewed murals before, and there was consideration given to the content of the art, but was it determined after that we no longer are curators of art in
I
itself?
think it was less, at least my recollection was less content, more that there were some of the earlier ones kind of overwhelmed, subsumed the building. So they, particularly ones where it was more geometric, they sort of took on almost like a camouflage pattern and obscured the sense of the volume, whereas this doesn't.
Right.
Yeah, we weren't looking at it as art critics, but really about its appropriateness.
It's scale and color.
Right, and right, how it was either, you know, enhancing or overpowering the building it was on, or how it was relating to neighboring structures in the district.
It was like the canvas that it was creating on the building rather than what the content of the painting was.
Right, got it. Cool. Well, all that being said, I'm very much in favor of this. I'm a huge fan of the mural project itself, so I'm very thankful to you all for what you've done and are continuing to do.
Thank you.
I agree. I think the sophistication of this is, the bar has been raised by the design on this. So I think it's very appropriate, and I think you articulated it well. You know, we're referring to the history.
We're all very excited about it.
Yeah, so I think it's well done. I'm completely in favor of it.
I agree with Stephen. I think for all of the guidelines we have, this meets those very clearly. And as a citizen, I find it beautiful and powerful. It'd be a great addition.
Anybody care to make a motion? Mike, want to try?
Hold on.
Yeah. Or I've got it if you don't.
You go ahead.
Having considered the standards set forth within the city code, including city design guidelines for rehabilitation and public design and improvements, I move to find that the proposed mural satisfies the BAR's criteria and is compatible with this property and other properties in the West Main ADC district, and that the BAR approves the application as submitted.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? And the motion carries.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, everyone. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
All right, now we're 0 Rugby Road. Certificate of appropriateness.
We start calling it number nothing, Rugby Road.
Z.
Little local, don't go there. Don't go there. 0 Rugby Road.
Okay, this is a certificate of appropriateness for new construction at 0 Rugby Road. As you know, it's a vacant parcel. It is within the Rugby Road University Circle Venable Neighborhood ADC District. Request for a COA for a proposed 3-story, 12-unit housing facility. That will be built above an underground parking garage. The building is composed of 2 distinctly different architectural blocks. The front section facing Rugby Road will be of a traditional design intended to complement the adjacent 513 Rugby Road. The rear section, which is connected by a brief hyphen, will follow a more contemporary design. You all looked at this in a preliminary discussion last June and had discussed this also last month at the February makeup meeting. And I've attached the meetings to the staff report, again, if they're helpful. There's a lot of discussion. I tried to distill down the key points. There was general support for the scale and the massing. However, the questions and comments were focused primarily on 3 things. One, the design of the central bay of the front elevation. 2, the roof line of the building facing Rugby. And 3, the conflicting designs of the front and rear buildings, whether or not they should represent a hybrid of 2 styles, should they be distinctly different or be different yet related. In comparing and in contrasting the various design approaches, 3 terms were frequently mentioned by you all: color, materiality, and connectiveness. So regarding the entry, as you see, the design has been revised. The pediment, the 2-story columns and upper balcony are removed, and they're replaced with a simple single-story portico with columns. The roof line of the front building is now flat with a simpler cornice. And regarding the 2 designs, there's still a variation
perhaps in the or perhaps in the upper story. The upper story breaks right at the base of the window. It seems like there's an odd gap of space between the second story and the upper story. I think there's the brackets, the proportion of the brackets and how they support the eaves is not quite a wood dimension, or the brackets aren't doing anything. So there's definitely, I'm sure, a lot of additional work that can be done. But I think that for a well-ordered facade on that street, in the abstract, it makes a lot of sense. But I see where you're coming from, Jody.
Yeah, I think as far as, massing is concerned, yeah, I mean, you showed it pretty well with your elevation diagrams. I think it would fit pretty well right there. So, yeah, I think as far as massing and the size of the building and just general shape of it, I think personally I don't see anything alarming or to worry about.
May I ask, Jody, what would you tell a sorority if they have a functionally obsolete building? How would you like to see them respond? Or what would you like to see us try to accomplish? I mean, when we want to come back with something that at least attempts to meet your concerns, and that is leave it exactly as it is, or would you be willing to accept some modifications?
Well, you say functionally obsolete. I mean, really, the only difference you've made externally is putting this central door here, but you're still keeping the side door. You're still keeping most of the walls here, so you're doing clearly a lot of different things inside the building to make it functionally work for them that we don't see. Why couldn't you do that with the building that's there?
Currently, there's 6 rooms across the front facade, 6 bays, and that makes the bedrooms on the interior such that between the 2 beds, which are smaller, that are custom-sized beds, smaller than a standard twin-size bed, that leaves about a 2'4" aisleway between the 2 beds, which isn't even enough for one person to pull out their dresser that's tucked underneath the bed, and the other person be able to get out of it. So instead of 6 bedrooms across the front width of the building, we're completely modifying the interior and changing it to 5. So it's 5 bays across the front. So that's a major modification, which totally changes the rhythm of the window placement from the existing.
Go back to the, so here you have the opportunity of putting fenestration wherever you want it because they have a continuous lintel there that you could modify that fenestration and still keep the lintel.
There's not actually a continuous. You can see it breaking.
But it gives the appearance of a continuous lintel. My point is, because you want to do 5 bays or whatever, doesn't mean that you have to then do an Italianate revival building, which what you're showing reminds me of. I mean, you're applying you're creating a false historicism by changing this to an Italianate building.
So what would you like to see, Joe?
I would like to.
That's the point we're here. We take your point that.
Well, but I'm just one person up here, and and you've heard others already say that they'd be okay with the Italianate. I'm just one person who has a personal connection with this building and has lived too long. But now the things that I saw being built are outdated. So I'm a little embarrassed that it seems to come to me that you're more. The board, I think, needs to be addressed.
Well, I'd say please don't be embarrassed. The whole reason we have 9 people up here is to get 9 different opinions. So I think your opinion is very important and well taken, so please don't hesitate at all.
Yeah, if I can chime, I think that's sometimes one of the more difficult things to explain to people about what this job does and what you all do. Everyone believes this is historic preservation, and we're, wringing our hands about old brick buildings, and that new design and adaptation to old buildings is probably a bigger part of it than the preservation side of things. But I will say it is the guidelines relative to non-contributing structures. It really is as far as what does the change do relative to that neighborhood, and it doesn't. I'm kind of flicking. It doesn't really offer anything on that sort of on the edge. I mean, for example, that the fraternity house a few down, that's the the one that everyone seems to hate.
The Fred Nichols
Yes,
design?
right. But
the chair of the architectural history department.
Exactly. And I didn't realize that. And I was just going to offer one thought from a builder side of things.
Who's on the Park Street Bank? You know what I mean?
The Park
The
Street.
SunTrust at Park Street.
On the corner.
I think it's
Johnson.
yeah, it's the same style. It's
You know what?
Johnson Craven. It's that period of.
But it's actually much more successful because of the glass, the use of glass, because it's not residential. I was saying, just thinking.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at different functions that they're serving. But it's clearly the same, that there is this period of, and here, I mean, it's set up so that they can put the fenestration where they want it. It's not aligned vertically. So you have more latitude with this facade than you do with a classical facade.
So that would be, as far as the guidelines would say, is you're getting a new building, essentially. Does it fit within the neighborhood? Fitting it to a 40-year-old non-contributing structure, I don't know. That would take some sort of pouring through the guidelines to find how we could substantiate that. I don't know. That's a good question, because we have a lot of buildings like that are on that cusp.
Yeah,
I was just going to offer.
50 years, so
Yeah.
it wouldn't be a contributing building. I was wrong.
Well, somehow, so the Republic Plaza was a contributing building at one point, and it was 1980s something, wasn't it?
And it never deserved to be out.
It's the
Right,
city.
but I'm just saying that was, I don't know how that happened.
The city, when when some were designations.
That was a mistake when they put on as a contributing structure. Yeah, Kurt Wassenaar, I think, was the original.
Yes, he was.
So, yeah.
But you guys still had to get a demolition approval.
We did,
Right.
and we had to point out that it was mistakenly put on.
Well, there are buildings, for example, in Newark, in the downtown ADC district, like everything is contributing regardless of age. But I just be a devil's advocate for a second, and Mike, I don't know if you looked at it the same way I did, but I always think of, all right, what looks good now, and then when someone says, all right, we have to value engineer this, what's the first thing to come off? And when I see things sort of being added to an existing facade, those bumped out columns at the corners, if you will, sort of.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, does that get lost?
I really like the look.
Yeah.
But I would be afraid that we're going to lose the details that make it great, in my opinion. Because we do
Can
see
you
that a
state
lot.
what those are? Because I might.
Well, I think, forgive me. I kind of like the transitional Italianate feel of it. We just don't have a lot of that around here, and I like mixing it up a little bit. I feel like if we give the buildings around here enough time, the Uncommon will be almost contributing in 50 years, and I'd like to think in 50 years I'd still like to tear it down. So. I think if I'm pointing out details, the floor to ceiling window doors, the Juliet balconies, the brackets, the bigger overhang,
Sort of
using the hardy
Viennese
artisan.
secession kind of flavor to
Yeah,
it. With
yeah,
the,
you're right.
With
A
the,
little
with,
Wagner.
the tall, thin French doors, French windows, and the separate. That's why Hoffman came to mind.
The dark frames too. And,
Yeah.
It's also got a lot of, John Matthews' signature roof, and there's a lot of, you say there's not a lot of this in Charlottesville. There actually is kind of a lot of this in Charlottesville built in the last 10 years.
Not in this
And
area.
I'm not arguing against it, I'm
Yeah.
just saying, yeah, it's, I mean, up and down, or behind Wortland, Street and, you know, JPA, anyways.
Well, I think a lot of those are kind of failing on the details a little bit, and that is, as Jeff's saying, what I would worry about here a little bit. I mean, suddenly you start flattening all the details, and I think that's more what you're getting in some of those buildings.
This implies a high level of detail.
Yes.
But whether, does it make
Whether
it?
that happens
does that
when
be
value
out of
engineering
it?
happens,
Right.
yeah.
Because otherwise, it's sort of styrofoam, or is it styrofoam box around the existing structure? So I guess the one way I could see looking at this, just to parse it out, was, let's just say this is a new building. Would we approve the demolition of the existing building?
I would say yes.
Right, I'm just saying.
Oh, if it.
I'm just saying that would be, disconnect the overlay for a second and you say, okay, is this building, the existing building, legitimately, if you just said, money, all money aside, just said, well, we're gonna tear this building down and build this building. Where do we land on that? Because it's sort of like, right now, it's kind of in that funny zone, kind of like, was it the Fountainhead, where they stuck everything on the modern buildings? So
Well,
it's a little-
that was my impression earlier. I was asking about
So it's got a
demolition.
little bit of that overtone, which isn't philosophically maybe what you're trying to do. I don't think it is. But, so I think the way one would parse that is I think the game we have to say is this building something we would object to having torn down?
Yeah.
And then how they tear it down isn't really our concern. Then our next concern is what is it?
Right.
Does this work as a standalone building? And what happens if we tear the other building down? I understand where Jody's coming from also. I mean, I've seen some buildings I've done get completely trashed, so, it happens.
Yeah, does it help that it, and I just said something to Aaron, and this is brick, and the rendering does kind of give this sort of almost a flat plaster look, but this will be a brick, painted brick. Does that help with any of sort of what you're thinking? I will say, I having visited Clemson a lot in the last couple of years, this design is really heavy down there, and it really works. It's really neat with these big brackets and this overhang roof and that upper story. So I really like that. UVA may not like the idea of something similar to Clemson, but it's such a beautiful design. But just again, if it's the bricks, I know renderings just sometimes don't tell the whole story. Just trying to get at things that might help.
No, it's true, the visual texture of the brick is not popping off and creating that texture that would be there.
Right, and I think once you do the brick, I don't think you would have to do the pilaster corners either. I think you could just do a very tight box.
Well, the pilaster corners are because we're working with existing pilaster corners.
Okay.
Yeah, those are there.
So that explains it.
It won't disappear.
Okay.
But also,
Masonry saws, just cut them off.
Yeah. 4 inches, yeah, that'll work. 3 over there.
I'm just baffled at, out of curiosity, would love to see a diagram of old overlaid on new, because it just looks like so much brick surgery that I'm amazed you're keeping any of it.
Well, that's part of the reason why we're painting it, because it is going to be brick surgery in certain conditions. Like the front elevation is the most drastic surgery. The side elevations, particularly the north elevation, is probably 99% intact with what is there. The south elevation is also going to be 85% intact with what is there.
That explains a little more as to why you're keeping and not, not demolishing the whole thing.
I was going to say real quick that as far as the historical significance of the building, I think that, Cami, you did an excellent job for that demo review before by how you went and articulated each line, and I think that could be a really good process to go through for all of us to see. Is how is this significant? Was the architect significant? What are the defining features? How many other buildings are there like this? And so that could, I think, perhaps address those questions for the board in a way that we feel confident in proceeding with the, in essence, kind of elimination of the building as it takes new form.
Yeah, I think you have to treat this as fundamentally demolition.
Right.
But I think that argument, because this wasn't scooped up as a contributing structure,
right,
becomes more of it's not. I mean, they could tear down the building if they wanted to, And I guess in my mind, it's, you know, whatever they do to it, it's.
Yeah, I agree, the discussion
It's
is
almost like a
different
new construction.
because it's
Right.
not
Yeah.
contributing.
I mean, I think it would be useful for us, and I think it would be useful for, you know, if we ever decide to reevaluate our districts for what's contributing and not contributing.
Right.
For example, maybe that bank on Park Street needs to be reevaluated. Yeah, I think we are legally kind of bound to look at this more as a new construction versus.
Got it, right, right,
Yeah, rehabilitation is something historic.
right.
I could be wrong on that, but that's how I'm
Gotcha.
feeling.
There's no sort of schedule, I guess, right, for reevaluating, like 25-year intervals, 15-year intervals, you know?
Yes, we can discuss that.
I mean, it's not, we don't have enough to do, so I just was.
God, you know,
Now we're still working on the years supposed to update your guidelines every 5 years.
I know, I'm totally aware of that, Cammie.
Right.
No, there are buildings that come up that, you know, the house on Ridge Street, if you recall, that couple's been working on is
Right.
the one that doesn't fit. It actually is what, a 60-year-old home, and it'd be an interesting addition. And it, I think though now that you're sort of turning that page and looking at this as, yes, this is essentially a new building, then the guidelines then come into play of, all right, I mean, just take leapfrog one house over. Does this fit into that? Oh God, it just went away. Sorry. Does it fit into what this street is? It? I mean, if we can suspend and I sympathize with where Jody is,
It's
but
so
are
good.
you all? Do you see this then? You know, fitting into this district, if you will, and that's where the guidelines do give you instruction.
Sure. I'd ask some more questions about that on those lines. And could we go back to the front elevation of the proposed? I mean, right here, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think there's something handsome, you know, in what you all are presenting. I guess, but I do feel like it, and I appreciate, like, I like the way, Mike, you said it, like, I think it's different and fun, and I appreciate that as well, because I think that's important in our fabric to have diversity. But I guess when I consider whether or not it's compatible with this district, I'm curious about what the design intent was to accomplish. Like, why is there this deep eave, and why are those brackets that are barely articulated, and you know, why is this, you know, pilaster corner there, you know, and how is that pilaster corner contributing to the overall aesthetic and goal that you're trying to achieve stylistically, you know, and then how will the railing, you know, be integrated with that, and what is the unified design language that you're trying to accomplish, rather than like we're calling it Italianate. I mean, would you all call it Italianate? Right. So like, what would you call it, and what is the overarching binding idea that you're trying to accomplish?
So the overall goal is to, I shouldn't speak for Erin, but we're working on it as a team, but our goal is to try to come up with a building that we think is appropriate for the street, that you guys will approve, but meets the functional goals of the sorority. And that's sort of paramount. And a lot of the things that you've mentioned, I didn't jump in, are all totally functional responses. So it's sort of what you may not see it, and this is again the 15th iteration. We don't mind doing more iterations to try to address some of the concerns. Some we may not be able to address, but we're happy to go back and keep trying. I want to make sure we're clear on that. We're happy to keep going back until we get it as close. We'll never get everybody to agree, but get it as close as to a final product or an appropriate solution. But we sort of look at this as a sort of, you might find this funny, but sort of classical modernism, sort of some of the classical components are there, but a more modern interpretation of those. And that's sort of what we were suggesting to the sorority. And then they came back and asked us to add things like the shutters and the Juliet balconies and different things. And we tried to accommodate their wishes as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the primary focus was on the internal function and then adjusting that skin to meet that function.
That makes sense, but I guess from my point, when I asked the question, I'm not as concerned about the internal function, you know, because clearly we're reviewing the aesthetics of the,
But
you know.
you asked the question.
Sure.
That's the direct response, is that it's a functional response or an aesthetic response to a functional request, because as Aaron explained, those bedrooms were just unusable.
Right.
Not to mention accessibility, life safety, all of those things that come to play in a significant renovation. Just to answer one of the questions, I'm not sure which one of you asked it, but about how can we be assured that what we're seeing here will get built. We're pretty clear, and they have a very, at least at the moment, a robust budget. So we expect that everything that you see here or that you approve will get built. I don't have any, I'm confident that will happen. Or it'll come back to you and you'll have to approve the changes, if there are any.
But I guess to elaborate further on what I'm trying to ask from you all, like when I understand that you're trying to resolve a lot of things and accommodate a lot of desires, but when you're doing that stylistically, like for example, how if there's not an so a modern classical style, like how does that translate to the detail of the railing, for example? Like when you're working and on making a cohesive whole stylistically, obviously that we're looking at and reviewing and hopefully approving for you, I'm just curious how your stylistic goal translates to the smaller details like the railings and like the way that the brackets are articulated.
I think we're still in conceptual design, and those comments, we'll take those and work through them when we bring it back to you.
Okay, great. And so that's why I'm trying to be helpful in the sense of saying I would love to see like that resolved, or at least that presented in a way that this is clearly there's the holistic stylistic goal that you're aiming to achieve.
Okay.
And I think to me that would be quite convincing that it's well thought out, it's well presented. In itself, it's got a unique character that can add to the neighborhood, as opposed to feeling like, oh, this is just a mix of the different desires that the people wanted. That to me is less of a convincing sell on the aesthetics of the building.
I think one thing that may help is, some of your this has your signature all over it, your firm signatures. It looks like a lot of the stuff that you guys have done before, not exactly, you've definitely reinterpreted things, but I feel like looking at some of their other projects in the area, you've made your own style, I guess, in some of the previous work that you guys have done. And I kind of see a lot of that in there. And I'm wondering if maybe that's
primarily the way
intention,
the
that's
roof
what's
and the
coming
eaves
up.
are treated.
The eaves, the railing detail, like I'm kind of seeing little bits and pieces of it throughout which maybe that'll make it make more sense.
Right.
To you.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Sure, I'm happy to check it out. But I would just also, again, this is just, I hope I'm trying to be helpful and get for the conversation of a preliminary discussion of what I look for and would like to see when it's presented for approval.
The evolution of the architectural language.
Yeah, and just like a cohesive kind of thesis, or like a clear idea of what stylistically and aesthetically you're trying to achieve.
Right.
Right.
The discussion we had, if you feel like watching the video, the work session on the Zero Rugby, this is almost a
reprise.
Yeah, it is. And just quickly, and two things in the guidelines, and it really would be all that we'd have to offer, but it says when designing new buildings in a historic district, one needs to recognize that while there is an overall distinctive district character, there is nevertheless a great variety of historic building types, styles, and scales throughout the district and sub-areas. And then this would fit sort of within this subcategory, this residential infill component. This is new buildings, new dwellings that are constructed on the occasional vacant lot within a block of existing historic buildings. Setback, spacing, and general massing of the new dwelling are the most important criteria that should relate to the existing historic structures, along with residential roof and porch forms. So that sort of, you've got the freedom to be different, but you've also got some elements that, it's the visual you used sort of helps with that. So,
Right, we shouldn't be, we're not mandating a style, and what we're asking for is scale more than anything. And also just something that, if it's fuchsia, that might be a problem. But in general, you could make an argument this should be fuchsia. But the point is, I think that, we're trying to just make sure everybody plays well with the neighbors. I think Jody's heartburn speaks more to issues, I think, in terms of what is, what constitutes a contributing structure right now. And, unfortunately, that one does not. But I think, our attitude has to be more, divorce, what's the final result? What are you trying to do? Does it make sense in terms of the context of the thing? And how you parse it out of that building is really, I think, kind of a secondary issue for us.
Yeah.
I mean, technically you could tear it down and start over. So
Yeah, I think in the main, the building is very in line with the spirit of our guidelines as written.
Yeah.
And while we may still have some discussion about particular details, I think that it's well grounded in that regard.
Right.
To be clear, I do as well. So when I'm asking for further articulation of what the style is, I think that the scale and the approach, and it's quite handsome. So please, I hope it's not overstated that I'd love to see, to better understand your stylistic and aesthetic decisions and direction. But I think generally speaking, it's going in a great direction. So I agree.
But sometimes those don't come till the end.
What's that? Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes that stuff doesn't all snap
Exactly.
together till
Right.
the very end.
Sure.
So.
Yep.
But maybe what we should at least say is, does the board in general feel like they're headed in the right direction? So that's probably the question you should ask.
Right, and, per the guidelines and appropriateness, I think generally, yes. I mean, my first reaction, I think, was very much like Jody's. And maybe just a condition to include here might be that, it is a locally significant building, so, before it's altered, let's have measured drawings and photographs for the archives at the very least. But if we, are thinking about it as, okay, let's set that 70s, whatever, 1980 thing aside, and what's replacing it, then, yeah, I think it's on the right track for being appropriate on the street.
I agree.
Okay. Thank you.
Concur.
We'll be back. Future meetings.
Sure.
I think about, when someone wanted to paint Bob Vickery's house and the response that, that's why I was sitting here thinking about Jody's probably like, wants to hit me, but I remember, that was a real visceral response. And I remember the owners just couldn't, that really baffled them. And I said, no, this is somebody that meant a lot to the community, or the architecture community. And so, yeah, I get it. I now know another old building to tear down here. Aaron?
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is Jeff here?
Yes.
Back to,
While you're pulling that up, can I just note that I don't think this is just a UVA thing. I've seen in other college towns that fraternity architecture in many different parts of the country is trying to out-big each other and out-classicize each other, and it's just, I think part of the pangs that we feel is that that contemporary or modern architecture hasn't solved or played a role or found a way into changing how those organizations present themselves to the world.
I think that's right.
Well, I think it's also a general lack of appreciation of international style buildings, good international style buildings, and the mid-century modern. There's some movements that are coming back or coming in now that are trying to that are acknowledging them and the importance of them. There's still in the general population a hate of international style and wanting to see detailing and postmodernism, brought into this period. They'll be putting gable roofs on Belushi's A school here pretty soon.
I think there's a movement too. The Greek community, is not, not as strong, but it's not what it was. It's not and I think there's a lot of competition to keep them,
new. That's what I think we're seeing a lot with these designs and changes. You're saying, how can we make our fraternity look newer and or sorority house? And I think that's certainly the situation here. Let's make our house look cool. But I don't know. That's not the. Let's switch gears here.
Dig, here, you want to shovel? No.
I talk about sororities, fraternities, the fun I used to have. Jeff asked me to add this to the agenda, and I some of you, when we were earlier at the meeting, I think I tried to introduce this. I understood it, and I'm going to let Jeff ask the question, but I did just to offer. I went back and looked at, for example, that's 201.
With all the parking on the first floor?
Yeah, I don't know. I just looked at when you all just sort of looked at mass and scale alone and what was sort of presented. And this was, Cammie suggested looking at the Quirk and sort of how they presented. I don't know, just so that there wasn't a blank canvas. You maybe had something to say, oh yeah, what we're thinking about, or in order to present, just have something on the chalkboard that you could work from, if it helps. If not,
Yeah, the way Quirk presented, I think, was pretty helpful, pretty useful.
So, Jeff,
as far as massing,
stage is yours.
I think getting rid of anything that we're presenting as an example shouldn't have a garage door in it. Period. Like all those buildings have garage doors on their main street entrances against one of our stipulations. I mean, I know you guys had to have one because you had only another way in, but I think that's where the city needs to pony up and help businesses have a good street front by not forcing them to have a.
And that is something we can talk about.
In-building parking.
The block lengths. But
Right.
what Jeff is getting at, and it's and I said, I think I understand correctly, is two projects that will likely involve special use permit requests, and those go before the BAR for its recommendation. And so the question is, what level of information is appropriate for the BAR review? Realizing that a full design of a new building is probably going a little too far when you're contemplating, whether or not you're going to get your special use permit. So that's sort of the preface to the discussion, and I'll let Jeff take it from there.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff. Hello again. Jeff Dreyfus, Bushman Dreyfus Architects. This is more a philosophical question and a process question that we have for you all. 612 West Main Street, the University Tire site, is going to be developed by the same team that is building 600 West Main Street. And so we are embarking on that process. We are going to request a special use permit for increased density. This zoning district no longer allows increased height as part of an SUP. So we are simply requesting for increased density. Current density is 43 units per acre. So this particular site would by right be 20 dwelling units. With the SUP, 120 dwelling units per acre would be 55 dwelling units. The question before us is what is required by the zoning ordinance of the BAR in the instance of an SUP. And so I'm sort of working backwards from where we ended the SUP process with 600 West Main Street. We almost had the entire elevation designed as it's being built by the time we got to the into the SUP process. And that was only for density. That was not for increased height as well. And honestly, it seems an unfair burden to a potential developer if the envelope is already defined what you can build by right, which the zoning ordinance now does. And the diagrams before you show you what the zoning ordinance says we by right can build. If the zoning ordinance says you can build that and we still have to go for the certificate of appropriateness for 20 units, how far do we have to go to be able to fill that same box with 55 units? The ordinance says that when the property that's subject to the application for an SUP is within a design control district, City Council shall refer the application to the BAR as may be applicable for recommendations as to whether the proposed use will have an adverse impact on the district. and for recommendations as to reasonable conditions which, if imposed, that would mitigate any such impacts. It's the use. It's not. So because it's in a controlled district, we are going to have to go through the certificate of appropriateness process anyway, and we're all on board for that.
Right.
But do we, and it's hard to design an elevation, a detailed elevation, if we don't know what we're going to be allowed to put in it. So do we design a building for 55 units, not knowing that we're going to get that in the end of the process? So in this particular instance, we'd like to, and so the massing that we showed here really and truly is the box, we understand. You will see, to harken back a little bit, the last page, the question regarding the mural and what might be done there. You know, we are already as a team
So you
beginning to
assumed it was going to get
consider-
passed?
Pardon?
You assumed it was going to get passed?
Well, we assumed something might be there, some mural would be there. So we're not proposing a design here. But it seems, in this particular instance, the use and having to work within the already defined limits of the zoning ordinance, of the envelope, how far should we go? We can do diagrams of elevations of what a 55-unit building might look like, but it seems to me.
It's within the same envelope.
Exactly. But you can't design, if you're gonna do 20 units, it's gonna be a very different facade
than if you
it's
have
55.
Right.
And to expect that an owner, a developer, will fund that very long process, an expensive process, without knowing that they'll get the increased density, not talking height, what's reasonable?
I think for us, I mean, I'm rather confused by the guideline that talks about an SUP and us considering use, because we don't.
I can, there is a specific part of the guideline to make sure that, for example, with 201, the clock tower building, when they were applying for their SUP, and this is the only specific one that I can think of in the years that I've been here, the fact that they had parking on the first floor and then they had condos and it was a mixed-use building. One of the things for the mixed-use building is it's supposed to be useful to the public in some manner. And so you all did not originally recommend that SUP to City Council because they were saying it was a mixed-use building, but there weren't any positives going to the general public from it. So I think that's what it means in zoning as like looking at the use, especially if it's going to be a mixed-use building, to make sure that, and I think it's one of the guidelines in the public improvement section.
Okay.
And things, so it's making sure that that use is going to benefit the general public somehow, as opposed to just the residents or whatever's going.
That makes sense. In this case, if you're talking about 20 versus 55 residential units, and and we can take that as a given, I don't see where, well, I mean, public use for an SUP, but that can be debated. But in terms of design, we're talking about the same envelope. And I mean, honestly, for us to see this sort of a schematic, what does zoning allow and what's the max build out? You either get the SUP or you don't, and then you design a 20 or 55 unit facade for this. It comes to us and it passes, or
Exactly.
So I'm not understanding exactly.
I think it's a formality just in case there is something that we have that could, I mean, like Cammy was saying, I mean, if some project comes up. So in this case for us, I think it is a formality, but I think it's also could be an opportunity for you to test us on what kind of massing we'd be okay with approving. For example, perhaps the complete build-out version that you've proposed we might not be happy with that, or maybe we are, but it would be probably important for you to ask us that before going through the whole process of the SUP. So in that case, it's more of how much do you want to hear from us before going into the SUP?
And that's probably more important than what's the distribution of fenestration on the facade for 20 versus 55 window building? I think is, right.
What are the massing implications of that higher density? That's the only thing that would really, you know,
Well, yeah.
you can have it as dense as you want as far as we're concerned. It has more to do with, you know, what are the implications on the street? You know, the parking thing kind of drives me a little crazy just because our guidelines clearly state we shouldn't have parking entrances on the main streets, and we've done it everywhere.
But how can you not have parking on an entrance?
So that's, I mean,
parking
so that's.
on your property without trespassing someone else's property if it's
Right,
not on
or
West
else you
Main
have to
and
have
either of
a,
those two
or else you have
sites.
to have a, you know, not a regional, but a local solution brokered by the city, probably, to make that happen. You know, it's, if you compare like to a larger city like New York or something, that'll have like a single lane entrance, then on the other side of the block will be a single lane exit, you know, so you don't get these gaping maws. But I just think that's been one of the things that we've really had to wrestle with in terms of what it does at street scale.
I don't disagree with you. Unfortunately, it's this requirement that we're backed into as designers. Honestly, there's a slight hope that we can connect to the parking garage below 600. There are a lot of complications associated with that, but for the same urban design reasons that you're stating, we'd love to try to figure out how to do that.
Right. Now, on the other hand, in this case, you have a long enough street level that you could actually make a hyphen or basically break the block in two, drive something down through there, and wouldn't be an issue because you wouldn't, your entrance per se wouldn't be on the street level. But I think I would think I mean, one of the things we've been trying to do is, and I know that I guess Lisa sort of has a problem with this, we were trying to tailor, I think with these bigger projects, the whole review process needs to be tailored differently. So it acknowledges that larger projects have to go in phases, and we have to be able to give people some sort of assurance that going forward, it works. I mean, you can't wait for somebody to design, you know, a multi-billion-dollar, well, $1 million building and then say, well, you know, we don't really like that very much. I mean, and it doesn't give us any latitude to steer the discussion.
I think, and I understand that, especially when it comes to height increases.
See, I think height's been focused on too much. I think it's really more the length of the street wall.
Well, and I understand that as well. It seems to me, though, that as an opportunity, I mean, I think this particular owner would say, would take the risk. If you say, yes, we have no problem with the increased density, which is a recommendation to City Council, you get the SUP. We all know we have to go for the certificate of appropriateness. And whether we test the waters in a meeting before that SUP is granted or after is a risk that the owner can take.
But I would say that would make a lot of sense to, at least at that point, figure out what the implications of that higher density are and throw some massing models at us right then and there. You know, in other words, say, this is what we're hoping to do.
Right.
So that you don't
And then
get that density, and then we say, well, we really would like you to take a 25-foot chunk out of this that goes back 40
Well,
feet.
but I think we're going to have that same conversation either way, whether it's before or after. And you have the trump card of not granting the certificate of appropriateness, ultimately.
Right.
And if you don't want the massing that's presented as the first meeting after the SUP is granted, it's no different than working through that process before, in my mind,
Yeah, that's
because
true,
you
that's
have that
true.
final vote.
Right, right.
So it's a process question, and there's considerable risk involved for an owner if they don't have the knowledge that, okay, at least density-wise, you're willing to say, yes, we want that. Then we can start the design process. And in this particular instance, it seems to me that this is exactly what the city is asking for, is increased density. So we're ready to go through the process of working with the BAR. But as an owner, I can fully understand why they'd want the assurance that they can have the density, assuming we can work through
Well,
it.
we've also been, some of our decisions have been mistakenly confused as being density judgments, which if they had nothing to do with density, it's totally been about amassing. And so, I mean,
I think we can make that clear in our, because we do have, I mean, as a formality, we have to approve, or we have to recommend the SUP to the planning commission and then recommend to council. And we could make in our recommendation, if we don't, the density's fine, we will definitely want to look at massing.
Right, I think, right.
And to be clear, we have to submit massing and elevations and a site plan. I'm not saying we're trying to get out of that, but how far that goes is really the question here. We're not going to skirt that requirement in the zoning ordinance.
Sure, and I think, to elaborate further, I think perhaps, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a good chance that everyone tonight there's a good chance that everyone's going to approve the increased density. And I could be wrong, but I mean, I feel like all of us are a lot in favor of increased density. We're more concerned, like they're saying, about how the building looks and the massing. So assuming that happens, I think what Tim is trying to offer helpful advice in saying, before you even get into fenestration necessarily, the massing is something that we can really offer feedback on before we even go into that direction. So if you wanted to start with massing, like when we see this long, you know, obviously we get worried, right? And so
we didn't want to get into the design aspect.
Totally, and I totally understand why you did it. You know what I mean? So I'm not arguing that, you know, but I think that's the right thing to do for this discussion, the way you presented it. But just to say that in order to be helpful, I think that you could come in with massing models that don't even necessarily address fenestration first, to really get some good feedback on what we're going to be considering and what is important to us. Because there's been so much, I know you've been to a lot of the meetings here, but then there's been so much discussion about this and so many projects that have been happening and so much public opinion about it, that even from a massing standpoint, I think there'll be some great discussions that are had far before you get into really locking in fenestration.
So what I'm hearing you suggest, Stephen, is the submission we make next month, come up with at least some concept of massing, as broad or as generalized as it is. Frankly, if we want to throw some windows on it and some elevations, we might have the opportunity to get approval or the recommendation from the BAR to the City Council that the use is not detrimental to the district, which is all that is required. We get some feedback so that then when we come on the next round, we've already gotten some feedback, and we're one meeting further into the process.
Right.
I mean, I think the use parameters, I think, are pretty low bar. I mean, it's really like no parking on the ground level, and I don't think, you know, the form-based code, I'm less inclined, which I realize is really the zoning department side of things, but from a form-based code standpoint, I'm much more interested in defining, you know, plate heights and that sort of thing, than not getting into what's going on inside behind the wall.
Sure. Well, I think important to me, though, is the mixed-use component of what you're showing here, and retail on the first level, and a high activation between the sidewalk and that first floor. That, I think, is just as important as the residential, and I'm fine with the higher density.
Well, I think that's right. And I mean, what you're showing here is residential on the first floor. So
no, it's retail.
No, it's on the back side.
Excuse me, street retail at street level, first floor, and you know, as long as you're not proposing, you know, to put apartments there
or parking.
Then
I mean,
as far as
we're
like
still working
the
with the
public
same.
use component and us recommending an SUP for use, I think what you've shown tonight demonstrates. So basically what happens from floor 2 up inside, how many units, we don't care. I mean, we will care when when we see how that's expressed, you know, architecturally on the facade, but for the purposes of going for the SUP, I mean, I don't think that we...
I just think the massing just has a structurally significant intention shown, and it can't just be kind of a Walmart box where you just, you know, kind of jiggle around with the edge. I mean, because like your current project, you know, you've got distinct facades and scales going on there, the one right next to it. And so I think that works really well. And I think you want to see that same kind of rhythm or something similar in terms of scale going on down the street, and that doesn't just become, you know, another flats, for instance.
I don't disagree with any of that, but those are all conversations we likely, in my opinion, we should be having once we know that we've got the increased density approved.
Understood.
Yeah. As long as the increased density doesn't require that kind of facade treatment.
You wouldn't approve that kind of facade treatment, so we wouldn't propose it. But even if we did,
you wouldn't approve it.
I mean,
So-
ideally, the greater
That's a
density
good- that's
also
an
means you have
important
some
warning.
more room to manipulate the envelope.
I'm sorry?
Arguably, the greater the density, the more latitude you actually have to manipulate the envelope. In terms of having a rate of return that makes sense.
Yes.
For your floor plate, so.
Right, to take that comment sorry,
No,
go
no,
ahead.
go ahead,
Yeah,
Steve.
I was going to say real quick off that comment, I think it's really important about, because obviously you have to calculate whether or not 55 units can fit within this volume, right? And that's going to take some calculus. But I think what Breck, correct me if I'm wrong, is hinting at is that, and as you know, like, there's very little likelihood that we'd approve anything close to what that looks like. And so it's going to have to require some cut, some give and take on that front. So whenever you're doing the calculus for those 55 units, definitely, understand that significant amount of this chunk will likely be taken away in order to achieve that.
We have, honestly, within the studio, we've started that process and we're churning away on it, but we also thought, wait a minute, we're churning time and money on something that we don't know is going to be allowed density-wise.
Sure.
And so, understood in that regard.
Right.
And it may be helpful to revisit some of the reasoning behind the Planning Commission's change of zoning from the, on West Main Street. Previously, there was a change of zoning from the east side to the west side of the street. And then we changed it from the north to the south.
North to south. Now it's
One
east
side
to
of the street to the
west.
other.
Yep.
It's
At the
it's
bridge.
a little dive.
Yep.
The bridge, yes.
But we changed it from west to east of the bridge. And that's because the character of the two sides has changed so much, and we have more of the historic character still left on the east side, and that character is more, is a more modest size and scale than what has the west side has become. And so, and not only the height, but also then the pattern of the buildings going down the street. And that plays into creating breaks in that long block. That was very important to us, and I think I'm hearing the same kind of concerns with the BAR too.
Well, we were a part of that whole change of zoning. We were part of the
Yes, you
team.
were caught in the middle of it.
So it's.
Well, they were
very
actually doing
clear.
the drawings.
Yeah.
They were doing the street sections.
Yeah, so.
Thank you.
No. But they're all good points. They're all good reminders.
Very convincing, yes.
And also to the point that, for example, the slight moves that were made at the flats clearly aren't successful enough, right? Like they clearly tried to create a rhythm and break it up with these that were not unsubstantial recesses.
you're
clearly not enough, right?
Your current project basically has an urban street to the back of the facade, so I think having pedestrian spaces and spaces, interstitial spaces that actually break the buildings up, that are occupiable, to go back and through, like the one at the residence, what's that thing called, at the corner?
Residence.
I mean, their little courtyard almost works, but not really, because it doesn't go to anything.
Can I offer, and I think Jody's got the right point with what, I think what the Planning Commission did down there on Gallery Court, where you went from sort of a low building with outdoor access, visible parking, now everything was behind a wall. And so the real push was, all right, we need to activate this. They kept saying that. So the fact that, if this is good as a graphic representation that you all would look at for the SUP, that's great. But you all also get, with that process, you get to make recommendations, and it could be, it doesn't have to be something drawn, it would be when this comes back with a design, given the more intensive activity or use, we don't want a wall, an apartment wall, we want a very active street, something that's permeable. And those become something that you offer as your special use permit recommendation, and they become sort of more than the guidelines, so to speak. They become something that really must be presented later in the design. So you don't have to have the design, but you can make recommendations. Does that help?
We're
right.
Yeah. 10 foot, okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to.
Can I? I'd love to say something. I've been wanting to editorialize on this. And I think there's a great lesson to be learned from the flats and that thing was built across the street. Did you do that?
No.
Thank you for asking.
I've never been all that disappointed with the flats. I think it's fine. I think it's far more successful with its relationship to the street than the thing across the street. And the thing across the street, it has those great breaks, but the way it crowds the sidewalk, and you can't get vegetation. The trees aren't going to live there. I mean, it's terrible for what it does to the street and to the community and the people who want to use the street. The flats are far more successful. A lot more glass. They're set back. You got vegetation. You feel comfortable walking there. Far more successful.
No, I don't disagree. The other thing that we're excited about is that the two existing contributing structures that are part of 600 West Main Street sit forward of the required setback for this new building.
Right.
So there's already going to be variability.
Because the flats is actually going to end up with more sidewalk eventually, because it doesn't West Main head over more, I mean, not the flats, the standard. I believe, doesn't it shift about 10 feet?
I don't think they give up anything in the street right away at this
They
point.
don't move it, they don't move it over a little bit? I was
don't
thinking there was a bigger sidewalk than that.
I don't recall. It's been a little while.
It's been a while, and I've
But
seen
I
a million
think
versions of
there's
it.
so much pressure on the existing right-of-way. I don't think
Right.
anything's given up. I think my recollection of that is that nothing was ever really done on the interstitial space between the right-of-way and the front of the building because nobody really knew what was going to happen on West Main. So the
Right,
demands
right.
weren't very deep in terms of what was required as part of that project, but I could be wrong.
But I do recall that they did get rid of parking at some point in some
Yeah.
places to try
Yes.
to widen the public way.
Again,
Right,
it's
yeah.
because the public way requires.
And because, and also the standard's got an enormous amount of parking.
Yeah.
So they don't need to have street parking right
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
And then, but, you can get a suntan as you walk down past the, those lights are,
So we had this, and also you had.
Well, so thank you. This is very helpful. To me, it's a rational way to proceed. So we'll see if we can do that on the next round. No, I mean, if we can make that process work. So thank you for that feedback. The other is that we are also, so I think 612 West Main may have been the surprise. The non-surprise is that 218 West Market is also being considered for redevelopment because we've got a conditioned demolition permit for the building. And so that, if we were to come for, if we were only looking for the increased density, I think we already have the basis of how we could frame that discussion. The question is then also, and it may be more reference to previous examples, but hearing from you all, if we were to come for a height increase, what is it, the kinds of things, what are the things that are important and that are critical to you all to address right up front?
I think we need context views for sure. The context north of downtown is definitely different from that south of downtown. So I think, it'd be really important to see the building in
Makes
relation.
sense. Yep.
and thin and tall is fine.
Thin and tall is
Thin
fine.
and tall is fine, yes. That's my theory.
Okay, well, can we quote you on that?
Sure.
Requote you?
Well, I mean, I think,
Let's go for
I
it.
think the landmark, for all of its peccadillos is, I think that's pretty successful from a massing standpoint because it allows light and air around it and it's not a block. And certainly lets light and air around it right now. And then I think Robert and Cecilia's project, I think that's pretty successful and I don't think it overwhelms the King building. I think it's appropriate to, along the railroad tracks where you have this, classically you would have grain elevators and lumber sheds and you have a huge amount of variety usually. So I think that, I think there's a height as a single element is being pilloried unfairly. I think it really has to do with overall massing and too much street frontage.
And materiality, because I think
Yeah,
that's what
that
makes
matters
that
too, yeah.
whatever that building is on the C&O parking lot, that's successful, I think, because of the lighter brick. And,
Yep.
one of the
It's-
reasons.
It's better in the building they designed across from it.
Well, sections through the mall and also long elevational
Yep.
comparative studies.
And then someday we'll
Yeah.
have a 3D model of the whole city, plug it into.
Well, we can each start contributing our parts to it.
Exactly.
Core building and,
Well, you're doing all the projects down there.
well, no, the two, side by side, that's it.
Yeah, I think massing definitely is in context the biggest thing, and then scale, of course. Like, as you know, there are many things you can do to help to assist, to augment scale, verticality, horizontality. And so when you're presenting this mass, to whatever extent, if you feel like you want to express, verticality more, horizontality more, if you want to make it seem smaller by breaking tripartite or something, like, I think at that point, you don't have to develop it fully, but I think that whatever strategies you want to incorporate to assist with whatever goals you are from a scale point, incorporate some of those strategies, at least at a basic level,
Yeah.
I think could be really helpful at that point.
That, to Cammie's point, allows you to start conditioning what you would expect to see as something moves forward.
Right.
That makes sense. I mean, I can understand a more detailed massing study requirement because you're saying it's okay to go higher, whereas in density only, we've got the height, we have to work to that already.
Right.
So.
Right.
I don't know whether it was an aberration of their reading of the height rules at the time, but one thing I think was interesting about Robert Celio's building is that it was kind of like, they pushed down here, this kind of came up and then pushed that part up higher. But it seems to me that if there was a more volumetric approach to density where you did, for instance, I could see the flats having been a better building if, for instance, the last corner next to the railroad tracks had gone up another 2 stories and possibly dropped some of the middle stuff down a little bit, but where you get a little bit of variation in that would have helped break up the overall mass.
A
of that
real
building.
silhouette to the building.
Yeah, yeah. And some of that might then give you breathing space to have, say, one of the things would have been really great there is where their main entrance is, there is actually a courtyard on the other side, and if they had just busted that through, that would have made a huge difference to that. It would have been much more of a, almost like a college, like and like you'd find in some of the older schools.
Quadrangle.
And a quadrangle,
Yeah,
or,
an interior.
or Tudor City in New York, something like that. I mean, where you have this sense of an urban landscape moving through the buildings. And I think that's the problem with these big blocks is they don't have any of that. So we'll be very interested to see what you come up with.
So will we.
More successful projects that came through with SUP in the past few years that you all like, that you can look at because it's on the DAR archive is 501 West Main Street, the Cork Hotel.
Cork Hotel, okay.
Generally, you all were
Was that a
pretty
height?
impressed with how it was.
Was that a height?
I think there was
Increase?
a height SUP, I would have to.
I don't think that was
I
an
don't think it
SUP.
was, I think it was too late for.
No,
a height increase.
that was just wrestling
Oh,
with
there
Bill
was an
Atwood for
SUP,
3
sorry,
years.
For 501 for the one before that for Bill Atwood.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's-
Well, that was before the zoning change.
Yeah.
And Cork came after the zoning change, but Jeff has mentioned the core building as an example, a good example of that. Sorry.
Yeah, because it makes connections, it makes urban space, it's not just a,
Super block.
yeah, it's not just super.
Yeah,
block.
it doesn't just fill up the block.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, is for me, what it does for community, for the city at the street level, amenities or activity, it needs to be part of the community at the street level.
Makes sense.
And you think about like also really successful old residential districts where you'll have sort of a little node where it expands and there's a cafe or something like that. And just getting that kind of, working that kind of second layer of detail into the streetscape would be really nice to do with the bigger chunks.
It's also, I mean, that is such an interesting knuckle in the urban landscape. So it'll be interesting to see how we can reinforce and enhance what's there.
It's an interesting site too, in that it connects two streets.
Yes.
And I don't know if this becomes a diagram that's part of your presentation, or certainly something that we're going to think about too, since it's such a odd mixture of properties and scales of building, is what are the other future development pressures in that block? You know, many of those are protected buildings, some of them would not be, you know, I guess all of them are
They're all
contributing.
protected.
But some of them are historic.
Yeah.
But what are the development pressures over the next 20 years? And
Yeah, it's a good question. Brown's Lock and Key comes immediately.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's the next logical question.
Right.
I don't know the answer to it, but yeah.
The city also owns a little triangle below Vinegar Hill there, right? Which would make a great little either park or Flatiron building, one or the other, but it would be
That's
nice.
1 bedroom per floor, apparently.
Yeah. Well, it's just very expensive, I guess, in that case. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a Portman hotel. Are you good?
Yes.
Are you good?
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So, place report. There was no place meeting.
No meeting.
However, I met with the putative lighting lighting group, which now consists of Andrew.
punitive?
Putative, not punitive. Punitive lighting, yes. We'll start doing punitive lighting. I like that idea. Which consists of Mark Schuyler, Andrew Monshine, Philip Iana, a guy named Ricky Patterson. Ricky and Phil Iana are both associated with the astronomy department.
Oh, I know Ricky.
And Phil and Mark helped write the original dark sky code for Albemarle County, working with Mary Joy, amongst other people. And then the city kind of adopted it, but there were some things that were done to it by both the county and the city that kind of undercut its effectiveness. But basically, we're trying to gin up some enthusiasm for tackling that again. And Mark is currently working with the Downtown Business Association to start looking at relighting the downtown mall. Start to take some study cracks at that. He's also working with LexisNexis to do lighting underneath the bridge. So I'm hoping that we can get enough critical mass there to also address the bridge and the mall in general. Because the bridge lighting is kind of stalled out, right?
I don't want to talk about the bridge.
Okay, fine.
I told Jeanette,
So,
when you have a design, tell me.
So that's all I know about the place report right now, but we're actually making some headway on the lighting stuff, which is kind of nice.
Good.
Who all is able to make it to the DAR guidelines?
What section are we doing?
I have not, I'm gonna be honest, I've not gotten to look through Jeff's notes. Where did you end last time in chapter 3? Did you make it through all of chapter 3 or not?
We made it through lighting.
You made it through lighting, okay, you didn't even touch chapter 3.
Maybe.
So,
No, we didn't touch.
We will be doing chapter 3.
Turn your hymnals
I think
to
we
chapter 3.
It is from,
quickly looked at a few pieces,
Don't turn off yet. Don't turn off yet.
it is from 12 to 2
Well, why was I already
in the NES
3
conference
pages in?
on
Oh, well,
Thursday.
we'll figure out.
Thursday.
So I might be able to join some of that via phone.
Okay, and I will get the updated, it sounds like we talked about lighting, then chapter 2 is basically wrapped up with the exception of, I think, garages and then the introductions. So we will be moving on to chapter 3. So how many of you can make it? 1, 2.
By phone, I can do it.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Thursday the 18th.
It's peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, I
Okay,
believe.
so like 4 or 5 people.
I'm not coming for peanut butter and jelly.
Bunch of cuts.
Neat.
All right.
Do you have any suggestions?
Actually, you know what, tonight was fantastic.
Actually, you
That was
can-
actually pretty cool.
Shish
Six
kebabs.
People, yeah, because Jeff and I.
Oh,
will be
6
there.
people, not
Yeah.
sticks, okay.
No.
That's what you said.
Sorry,
Six,
I'm
not
a
six.
little behind. I've been working on a database for Jeff
Okay.
that starts in 2003 and is all the actions up until now. So
Oh my
I have
gosh.
1 month left and then I'm done.
Yes. All right, so just quickly, but probably already heard, Cammie will be leaving us, going across the street. But I just want to say, Cammie, I could not have done it the last 14 months. In fact, my first day here, I said, please don't go anywhere until I have my feet on the ground. So, and I can't thank her enough for that. So make sure you all,
Can we find an appropriate time or place to celebrate your time?
yeah.
I'm not leaving the city.
Not-
I'm
yeah.
across to Jared IQ. I'm gonna be their operational manager. So I'm gonna be getting into some finance and marketing and managing the office. So in the next likely 3 years, the consulting firm that I was working with that did ornamental cast iron, they're looking to expand, and they might have a mid-Atlantic office. So they asked me if I'd be interested in running that. So I need to get some different experiences.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Even closer to the tin whistle. All right, don't leave. Quickly, I did meet with Mike Murphy. He has authorized the removal of the tree in front of Westminster Pres with some conditions, and so I'm working through that legalese so that we can at least move forward on that. Second and third and fourth, some things I just need to ask you guys, you all, for some assistance on. This is 872 Locust Ave. It's in the Historic Conservation District. I just threw this together so that I could kind of see what's going on. But the things that are there are some tree removals in order to facilitate a new garage. Pool house, not to worry about down behind, some terrace pergola work. And then what they have is this brick wall in front. They'd like to breach the wall in order to have a walk from the sidewalk. The question is whether or not I can review this administratively, or do you all feel that this is something that needs to come? So here is in their site plan existing and what's proposed. So I don't know which graphic
Is
is
this Oliver
most.
Kudner's old house?
What's that?
It's not Oliver Kudner's old house, no.
No.
I'm not
It's a
sure.
different
yeah.
one.
No,
It's-
this is my project. It's a few houses up from that.
Yeah, so like the design of the pool house down back, and then there's the design of the garage. So the rules allow me to approve things administratively in a historic conservation district with the consent of the board chair and co-chair, but I still just wanted to try to think, who's the, can't think of the architect all of a sudden, just, you know,
Julie Dixon, Rosny?
yeah, and so kind of do we think they need to make a submittal, or is this something that we can, that you all, and I realize we can't vote, and I'm not asking you to vote, maybe just sort of a, gentle
Those
grunt.
seem like significant
And Red Clark is
changes.
the landscape architect.
I'm gonna, you can't speak for Melanie, but I'm thinking of her past comments has been, she'd prefer that this had public comment.
Fair enough, and so that's helpful, and I can let them know on that.
It's right on the street.
Yeah, and then the 450, yeah, so this is law office, Mr. Summer. It's kind of neat, really hadn't looked at those two turrets, and even though I walk by it every day, it's kind of interesting.
used to look out right on that building. It's crazy.
So, why is it blue?
I think you clicked it.
There you go. So what they are asking to do is,
Take off the porch?
fence this area in the back, just to add, and this is the plan, just sort of put like a 4-foot tall picket fence around this portion and have return, then just have parking right here. This is, they said is more serving as their residence now than as their law office, and they just would like to create a little privacy there. So again, 4-foot simple fence. One things that, I know in my opinion, there are some things that could be done administratively. This probably fits with that, but
Given that
This
we.
is protected property.
It's protected property, and also given that we made, we definitely, the Murray's building, which is just down the road there, I mean, we definitely looked over their shoulders when they were doing the backyard on that house. I think we'd want to have something to say about this. What is, the
Yeah.
pool, the poorhouse?
I don't
Is
know
that
the
it?
name.
It's the mansard roof house, it's,
I mean, this
Yeah,
is
I
80. This is 80C district, right? This isn't. Yeah.
I think you could probably tell them that they're trying to add a backyard where there was pavement.
Which is great.
Fantastic, awesome.
I was like, yes, please. And he said, is there any opposition to me, putting grass down? I'm like, oh my God, absolutely not. That's fair enough, and I can tell him, that he needs to get a submittal, we'll go through BAR, just again, because of the visibility, the proximity to, this is just not where I want to do things.
Well, we want to see,
The
we want to
oversight.
see that fence.
Okay.
And see what the planting is, all of that is.
An 8-foot board fence would be very different.
Yeah, it's all 4 foot. I said, please tell me there's a fence there that you're right. He goes, well, I got this old wire fence. I was like, I didn't need to do it. But then this one, I got a call today. There's a new juice place going into the juice place here. And,
Creative.
and it's a bummer because that ceramic mosaic's gone already. But so this is a young man. It's got the juice place over on the corner. Is in the middle of renovating this space, and this window right here, they'd like to put something like the Fitzroy has out of, there's just out of the catalog, a folding window, and this they already reviewed, there's no ADA issues or anything, there's no access, this is rather compact. The question is, well, they need to order the window, and it's like an 8-week lead time. I said, tell me you can get it in 70 VLT, and it looks like they can. The manufacturer assured them today. So, again, the question comes down to, is this something, if this goes to the BAR, that, I'll be candid, that sort of squelches their construction schedule.
Is it fitting within the same masonry opening as that?
Correct. Nothing's
Okay,
changing.
So it's not being enlarged, that yellow.
And when it folds, it's folding in?
It's folding, and if I didn't copy the plan, but it folds, it does the same as this.
Does fold out?
Yeah, and the width is such that it's,
I think it does the same thing that Red Pump does.
yeah, Red Pump does. It opens against this here, and this is like well, whatever. There's no issues with this. The staircase is wide enough. No code issues.
That's what I was just wondering about.
And I said, if it's 70 VLT, it's an existing opening, it's not changing a dimension. I don't even know, geez, Jody, talk about buildings that kind of have a, like what era is that? But.
Transition.
Yeah, transition. I like that. Yeah, so.
Is it going to be a white frame?
It's going to be, I think he said sort of a bronze.
That'd be better, because then it won't compete with the other, because all the other windows are big, so if it's got a dark frame inside of the white frame, then it'd be more innocuous, less attention to itself, I suppose.
Look, it says, and new wine.
You mean keeping the white, like casing trim?
Keep the white trim around it, and then
Yeah.
put a dark window inside of it.
Right. I think that's.
I do have to ask him what this is here. Not sure about,
What do you call it? Paint?
I want to see what, yeah. New, I cut it off, but, yeah, paint, I'm not I'm gonna clarify. Look, you guys aren't changing anything other than this window and this window opening, and we're not reworking this, but.
Actually, is that brick above the window, or is that some sort of, you said there was tile there?
No, it was in that interior wall where they, I don't know, a couple years ago, the guy did that mosaic on the wall.
But this looks like a different material right there, so is that?
It's
if just like a
I wish
stucco
my
then-
photo were clear. It's brick, and it's just a little bit of a,
Inset?
Sure? It looks like a stucco.
Parged, yeah.
Or-
Yeah, you're right.
So they're just gonna,
There's a straight line.
if they're gonna paint that, that's totally within your,
I got you. Right. I saw red and thought I saw brick.
I don't see, yeah, you're right.
Well, what I'm gonna do is be clear with them, they wanna, tell me what they're doing, if it's, I'll go look at this again, but as far as replacing that window in the existing opening, given what was at the Fitzroy at, Red Pump, I just felt like it's one of these things that, I don't wanna kinda go wild with administratively approving things, but it's, when it seems reasonable, it's just,
So they haven't ordered the window, though?
no, and that's gonna be their holdup, and so if it bumps it a month, they also asked me if I knew who could move the trash can, so I said, yeah.
So it's swinging
not a danger with
Swing
someone
No.
swinging in?
Yeah, and it's collapsing against this part of the frame here. So
But it-
Yeah,
it's
but
not
no,
coming out
it's
into
gonna
the
stick
side-
out, it's gonna stick
into
out
the
2,
stair.
3 feet, right?
no, it's only it's I don't know what the dimension. Why do I remember
Even if
seeing?
it stuck out a foot, it seems like people would run into it. all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah, that would be my concern,
it's
unless you
same
had a
as red pump, it
planter
goes
sitting, you had planters or something, to
Okay.
direct people around it when it was open.
Well, I know he talked to Craig and the zoning folks, and there
they
was
said it
no
a-
issues, right?
The
So
building department.
right, so I'll.
Because that doesn't look, that looks like it's all in plane, there's nothing to stack up against there, unless he moves it to the back of the wall, at which point it still probably doesn't work.
I know, I think he just was trying to create this sort of open it up to the mall, create a, some accessibility, even though, of air, not necessarily people coming in and out. That's not gonna become a patio, but just to sort of have I don't know. All right, I'm good with those two, and I'll take care of getting these others in, and then,
Can I ask one clarification
Yes.
question on the Locust project?
Yes.
The pool house, garage. Would taking down the trees be administrative approval? Or does that need to come to?
This is where the historic conservation districts, they're still somewhat, we're still learning. It's the way, Mary Joy used to make some judgment calls on things that I'm probably just not, as I say, ask me in a year. It'll be things that I'll be a little more comfortable with. But these are not the street trees. Those aren't being touched.
No, these are all in plane
yeah.
or behind the house.
This one back here is a large tree, but
It's a big hickory.
yeah, it's
It's a nice tree.
Yeah, if anything that comes up by the street, I'm gonna ask you guys about.
Okay, there are 3 trees that
Right.
they're trying to remove. It's
Here, and these look like 2 hollies, I think, in the
It's
photo.
2 hollies. That one right on the property line is a hickory. The one behind and the one next in front of the holly is, or in front of the hickory is. Those are both hollies.
Okay.
They're not that big.
And like I said, anything that not seen from the road is
Well, you can see them from the road.
well, this back here, it just almost.
Well, the reason I ask is because if we do it, they're going to want to move forward on it, and removing those trees is a big part of moving forward on it.
So
I don't think we have much leeway on landscape.
fencing.
I thought the city had a tree ordinance over a certain caliper. Am I wrong?
Actually, I don't think you are, but I think that's if you have to get a site plan. I actually assume this is getting a site plan because it's getting a garage.
It's a residence, so.
It's residential. So,
Okay.
yeah, there's.
There is something but yeah, maybe it's just for.
But there was a caliper, okay. I know, I was pretty sure there was a caliper restriction, because
I think there
I used to ask Huja to come out and let me cut trees down. Oh, we would cut that one down.
Big one in my
Can't
backyard
cut
that's
that one
not there.
down. Okay.
But it was hollow. I imagine if you all had said, no, you have to keep it.
I was just waiting for Whiting to hit it.
So, but, again, this is just part of this evolution of, I think, as we're looking at our guidelines as well, try to think back, what are the things that we've consistently looked at that we can,
they're not really.
you trust me to make some decisions on? What are things that, because these are the questions people will say, do you think I need to do this? And it's like, well, let me ask. And so that's what I'm doing here. It's more difficult in an entrance corridor because I can only ask the planning commission at a planning commission meeting. Because
Recently, before Mary Joy left, she started actually reading off all of her administrative decisions.
And that's where, yes, I know there's some, there were some things to, I tell you guys, the enormity of stuff that I get asked to comment on and respond to, and it's like, because there are certain things where, when someone says, hey, I'm painting my front door, I'll say, where are you? Oh, it's a red door, you're painting it red, and I will do it with an email, say, you're fine, maintenance and repair.
But I mean, I think she actually mentioned painting and stuff would be.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it was a list. I don't know if she actually read it, but I thought it was part of our.
I think she.
Did she read it?
Sent an email with it out, because it wasn't read out in the actions, I can tell you, because I just went through all of this. So
Okay.
I think it was, I have seen some of them, I think it was more of an email sent out, these were just the VR, these were the admin approvals I did, and it would be like, this address, painting, this address.
Okay.
Right, they're pretty much an FYI.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
so, because oftentimes a lot of people come to you and be like, did you know this happened? And I mean, if it's an administrative approval, you'd be like,
Well, I think Lisa required it. There was some legal, yeah.
Well, and you and I were talking about it, I think there's, I don't know who I was talking to, but there's administrative approvals where I say, yeah, do it, you're fine. Then there's the $100 administrative approvals. And, and I think that there's probably, a place, I was talking today with Brian Halaska. I said, it's probably, something valid in a $25, administrative review. At least then it's something formalized, but it's not the $100, and you spend more time reviewing and receiving, or just the paperwork than you do just simply saying do it. But we'll talk about that. Thank you for your help on this, and I'll get these through. And sounds like
Well, so you didn't get.
I've done that since ninth grade.
Power.
Yes, yes. It was right to my head. I think we have to have a beer after that.
yeah, so next.
Safe drive.
Just get going.
The elevated itself.
No, I was around when Bill McDonough was a fiber, and that was like,
Oh.
that was enough.
4 months pulling material. It was actually very rewarding. Despite what
my son's home for 3 weeks. This is so. And we're gonna go down to get the big game this weekend. And then, back to spring. I mean, literally, there aren't holes in which to just take time. Because I've got a bunch of stuff coming in for the entrance corridor review. Tammy's leaving, which, I'm really excited. She told me. Don't leave yet. But I wish we could find a way to permit me to have somebody say, I feel like anything in a historic conservation district, like a new dirt, I should be able to. I mean, yeah, the stuff.
Architectural advice.
Really clashed on that was that hotel.